Coogs House. We don't get super serious super often, but today is going to be one of those days.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're enjoying this conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below if you can hit a curve. I think that's as much fun as today's conversation is going to be. It's can you hit a curve or not? Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. More on that later. But we have some important things to discuss today regarding a sport that we don't cover very often, a program we don't cover all that often, and that is Houston Cougar Softball. So we have a guest coming on to help break the story that honestly they broke first, and that is Sam from the Scott Holman Pawdcast group. Without further ado, let's bring on Sam. And we are joined by a face and voice I'm sure folks that listen to Houston Cougar Podcast all day, every day have heard a lot of and seen a lot of, but Sam of the Scott Holman Podcast. Sam, your question of the day is about applesauce or about, I guess, can you hit a curveball? Or we usually have a silly question at the start of the day. The silly questions feel out of place here. So I just want to ask how you're doing.
I'm doing okay. Like I said it on the show, and we're gonna talk about the topic. I haven't slept as well. I'm not trying to make myself I'm a martyr or something like that. Like, I'm fine. I have a good life. It's like that, but it's been a stressful last week or so. But I think to kind of give an overarching thought of all that we talked about is the three of us. I'm comfortable speaking for my two co-hosts here. We couldn't have lived with ourselves if we did, finding out what we found out, reporting out what we reported out, and decided not to talk about it. So that's, it was a stressful thing to do, but it was ultimately the only thing we could do with this topic. I'm sure we'll dive into it and say at the top here, like, love you, love Locked On Cougs, love what you've built in, I think, a relatively short time. And it is very much more of a me problem that we haven't connected so far than you. You're fantastic. And it's really nice to finally talk to you, even if it's not the nicest topic. We'd certainly rather be talking about other circumstances to have this first time in your podcast kind of topic. But yeah, I think a necessary one to talk about.
No, let's get together and talk about fun things like receivers and safety.
We will.
Let's talk about other things someday.
Later this year, we will.
Because today we're going to talk about some, I'm going to say allegations, things that come up that you guys were told and reported on and did a full, I think it's like 45 plus minute episode on within the Houston Cougar Softball Program. Some fairly serious things. Things that, I joke to typically open my shows that we don't need to be joking about. Some very serious things going on in the program, and a bunch of things to jump into on that. We're going to remain as anonymous as possible. I think that, there are only a handful of players. It's not a very big team. It's not a 100-person football team, right? Like there I think are things like that. But first, Sam, before we get into specifically reactions to individual things, as a whole, as you and Bobby and Dustin are getting these things rolling in, what's the thought process? I mean, like, oh my God, like, I can't imagine what I would do if this is coming my way. What's the thought process when it's coming your way?
I mean, I think the initial human reaction, you can't take that out of the equation here, is just shock, is just being kind of gobsmacked, kind of forming your thoughts, gathering information, a lot of asking questions, a lot of follow-up, to make sure you're really understanding correctly what you're being told. But I think the initial reaction is just being gobsmacked. And I think what I came back to is being kind of baffled. It seems overall throughout this, like, really all the hallmarks of like what you don't want, even beyond a sports team, what you don't want in your sports team, what you don't want in your boardroom, what you don't want in your insert name of company here, the kind of culture stuff going on. Like, that wasn't the most important. That wasn't the most, I think, shocking aspect of it, but that was kind of the through line. So much stuff where you feel like it's almost a case study of what not to do in terms of how you create a culture, how you run a program. It's like basically like down the list of theoretical things. Like, and that was the craziest part to me, that it was allowed to go on for this long. I guess this long being up to present time here tonight on June 4th. Like I think that's the human element is shock, and it's shock, and then trying to understand further. And I think my co-host and I were very careful, and what we asked, how we asked, how do you get people to talk about something that's very, very painful, very difficult, and something that came up repeatedly in talking to the people who helped us report out on this is that just the theme of any kind of whistleblower previously was going to get some kind of retribution, that there was no way to do this anonymously for players. And that was, I think, really, outside of the most salacious allegations, I think the most shocking, upsetting part of it is just that these people, these very, very different group of people that we talked to put this together, really didn't have an outlet for that. And that I think, I'm glad we were there to do it. And I think I did some, talked at the top about how, this was very tough on us, something like that. The people who actually talk to us are 1,000 times braver. They're putting out 1,000 times more stuff at risk than me and my two adult co-hosts to do a podcast. People who have been on a softball staff, people who played the sport collegiately. Like, there's a lot more for them. So did this for them, because I think we couldn't have lived with ourselves if we knew what we knew and learned what we learned and didn't.
Well, and there's all kinds of different rules and ways around it right now, I guess. But you get 4 years of eligibility, right? The idea that kids are putting a very short window of their lives on the line to do this, and I want to stress the bravery and courageousness that requires. Serious allegations, firearms. I would argue verbal abuse. I would argue psychological abuse with some of the nutritionist stuff. I don't know what angle you want to jump into first, because as you mentioned, the most disappointing thing was the overwhelming idea, like they couldn't come forward and put their name on it publicly because of the way that other people have been treated before. Is there an angle that you want to start with in outlining kind of what we're talking about here?
I think the most difficult thing for me was putting myself in the shoes of a parent or a sibling or a significant other of any of the people that have come through this program, and the people that we talk to. Because, I mean, as a parent, like if you send your child off to college, even if the child is from the Houston area, is playing for the University of Houston, they're still leaving your home. They're still going to a place, where you're expecting, I think, the staff to be people you could trust to do right by these young people. And that doesn't necessarily mean playing time and stuff like that, but to not punish people for coming forward, to when players feel unsafe because another player on the team travels with a loaded gun and has threatened teammates before, has talked about shooting stray dogs, things like that, that you would act on that you would do what needs to be done to have the experience just be a safe and healthy one for the players. That was the most disappointing thing for me. And for me, I don't have a significant other, sibling, or what have you who's playing college sports. So it's a perspective I had to get myself into. It's empathy that I think I kind of grew in the time of doing this podcast. That was, I think, the most disappointing thing for me, is that with any college head coach of any program, you're being trusted in the lives of these young people, 25 to 30, however many on a softball roster. And I don't think anyone involved here in a leadership position, whether that is Kristen Vesely, the softball head coach, or the people at U of H who Kristen Vesely ostensibly reports to, I think fostered that environment. Like, I know that's kind of fostering environment. It's kind of a corporate speak way to say it, but I think that was the most disappointing part for me. And I think the second part of that is a lot of, and I think it's the more quote unquote minor allegations. I mean, it's more minor than a player threatening another player, referencing a gun or something like that. But like just petty tyrant stuff, just, like not allowing snacks in the clubhouse, being, from what we could tell, the only Division I softball program that doesn't allow players to leave the hotel before and after games. You hear stuff like that and you're just like, what's the end game here?
All right, pause in the action here for a second. I got to tell you guys where to get tickets to all the things you're going to be doing this summer. Baseball games, concerts, theater, comedy shows, whatever you're going to go do, you got to go get the tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today to go do it, take all the guesswork out of buying tickets to the NBA or NHL finals, and do it with all kinds of different deals that get better as you get closer to tip off or dropping of the puck. They have last minute deals, zone deals, flash deals. I love that when I am picking a seat, they can show me what it looks like in that venue, from that row, in that section, for that type of event. That's so key. It makes me feel comfortable that I'm getting a great seat, and I know I'm getting a great deal because the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You can find tickets in the same section and row for less. So head to Game Time today and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download Game Time app today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. I'm just so excited I stumbled there. But download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
Like you
Right.
Coach Parker, I'm not trying to get you to weigh in with that, but like you have to think of like, what's the end game here? Like, what do you think players are going to respect you more for having this incredibly strict rule? You think players are going to be like, I'm really glad this coach kept me from getting dinner in Lawrence or whatever on a road trip with my dad and my mom, who like took off work in a 3-day weekend to come see me play in my college season. Like,
and I'm dealing with high school kids. Like, this is not the kind of shenanigans they're getting into are small potatoes compared to all of us, right?
But just like, what's the end game? Like, okay, if you have these rules, okay, well, it's for for the betterment of the player somehow. Like how
though? Yeah.
What is meddling with your assistants like practice sheet, or saying that they can't call pitches during a game, or having incredibly strict rules about when you could come and go on a road trip? Like, what is that accomplishing? It's like I said, introducing it. It's petty tyrant stuff, and it's disappointing, I think, to put it mildly.
There's like the two sides of this, because and I don't there's like questions in legality surrounding the gun thing, the firearm thing, that I honestly, and I don't want to pass the buck, I'm not equipped to know. I do know that most college campuses prohibit that. So like if you're carrying that on, it is a big Second Amendment state we live in Texas and all that, right? But I do think that there's something to like college campuses and being with the team and just like honestly like a feeling comfortable around your teammates kind of thing at a cultural level. There's the tyrant level stuff. And I started writing when I was like taking down notes. I was like, I'm going to hint at talk about this some in the show, and then you're obviously willing to come on to talk about it too. But just unnecessarily being a jerk, like that's just like out of nowhere for no reason. No one asked you to be a jerk here. I worry about psychological stuff with the nutritionist too, and the idea of this may be me trying to be standing up for people and being almost patriarchal in the way I do it, and that might be problematic too. But like controlling nutritionists in women's sports, and there's like a long history there of like controlling what women do and don't eat in their body. Like there's problems there too that I don't know if they completely get uncovered or not in the course of y'all's reporting. Not that any of us are journalists by trade, but it's uncomfortable to say the least. I don't want to sit on the gun thing, because I do think that that's going to probably be like, if this thing hits Sports Center, if your show, not that this is us talking about your show, if your show at Sports Center, the gun thing's gonna be the headline, right? Was that the first thing? Like, okay, we have to talk about this. Like at what point in it was like, okay, a player's carrying a firearm. We're gonna call her player A because we're not trying to, this is not our job, right? Player A is carrying a firearm. This feels big. This feels problematic. Even if they're just talking about stray dogs, which is Michael Vick-esque in its sense too, right? But that seems big enough to be, okay, we got to do something with this. Was that the tipping point? Was there any tipping point?
Honestly, the day, like Bobby described in our show, is like it was a kind of trickle. Heard some whispers of stuff in the past, but nothing even in the galaxy of like, oh, this is enough to credibly report on. Is more of a, it's weird, and just kind of file it in the very back of your brain, but nothing that we could really do anything with or wanted to do anything really with. And the day it went from drip to we're soaking wet, we need to do something about this, I full disclosure, I live in the Western United States. I am 2 hours by my co-host. I woke up around 7:30 ish. Yeah, I slept in a little bit, and I woke up to like 40 something messages from my co-hosts in our group chat, and I don't know exactly what point it was, but like once I caught up, I was just very much on board with them. Oh yeah, like this is the point of no return here. Like this is where we absolutely have to dig to the end of this tunnel to see what we can find here. And I think it was probably the gun stuff, but I think for me, honestly, that's the most salacious thing. That's the headline grabber, like you said. If God forbid this ugly mug, this face for radio ends up on Sports Center here, is just like the early, just like that every to a person was just like that. Any concern about this was known but immediately ignored, and then oftentimes when the complainant was a student athlete, was retaliated against. Like we got that so early and often, and from every single person who contributed emphatically to the reporting of this. That to me, that just struck me so wrong. And I said on the show, like, the sports admin should not be a rubber stamp for any allegation again. Like you could get any disgruntled player willing to say any disgruntled thing. I'm willing to even take that premise on, but to have it be a rubber stamp for the coach in all functionality, and also a rubber stamp that burned the people who had the temerity to speak out about something, things that I think this reporting has revealed probably had like a good amount of merit, not to really relitigate every single case there. That to me was just like, this is I don't know if I can curse, so I'm going to say this is BS. And for me, like, not that my co-hosts weren't already. I didn't drag, like, they were very much as on board with this as I am. I am not like the driving force of this or anything like that. But that to me, it might not have been the most salacious detail, but it's the one that I think stuck the burr in my saddle the most and made me want to see this to the end.
Completely. I don't know exactly how far that goes, aside from ultimately player and then any, I want to say adult in the room, but truth is the players are young adults too. People getting dismissed that should have known and stopped this, right? I don't know how much farther it should or have to. Hopefully it doesn't go. Hopefully that's really concrete.
I was gonna say, I don't either. Like, I'm not even sure we dug to the proverbial bottom of this proverbial tunnel here.
I hope it doesn't go much farther, Sam.
Wait a second. I hope not. I really do. But I also, as I sit here with you, on this evening, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the deal. Is like, who knows? So there's a weird part of me, Sam, that wanted to connect this to winning and losing, because I have a hard time thinking a team with this much going on have the ability to focus on the sport at hand. And I don't mean to say that's
question, but I have thoughts on this too. Like,
I don't think that that's the most important thing here. There are all kinds of reasons teams win and lose. However, I would also point out that the team has not been great since the pandemic. And going back and looking through stuff, because I gotta admit I wasn't a gigantic softball fan once, but going back and looking through stuff, I was like, okay, they've really not had a great stretch. Is there some correlation here potentially? And this is entirely off the cuff. This is not like based on something a kid would have necessarily said to you in confidence, I hope. And don't feel like you don't need to breach their confidence they did. But they haven't been great for a while. And if this is happening too, like this feels like distraction leads to problems. Am I wrong there?
No, I fully agree. I think we deliberately, and your assessment also, your very general assessment is hard. I wouldn't dispute a word of what you said, kind of assessing the last several years of the program and your question. I think we deliberately made the episode, like, we didn't the only mention of this current season is we did a very quick mention at the top of, this is when Kristen Vesic took over as head coach. The program made the NCAA tournament these 2 seasons. The program had this record in Big 12 play. Like, we kept it very factual because it's like, it's all very much beside the point. But to kind of like talk about like the implications of this reporting, I mean, it goes back to the petty tyrant stuff that we talked about, maybe 7-8 minutes ago. Like, it is hard to win at Division I anything, Division I football, Division I tiddlywinks if somebody sponsors. It's extreme. Like, you're talking about the very best prep athletes in the United States, like, competing here. So it's hard to, like, to ask these questions from my perspective, get the responses, and really just, like, dig into that and think, like, there's no way if you're the student athlete here that you would want to run through a brick wall for this person. Do something that's already very difficult. I'm not saying these athletes, like, weren't trying or anything like that.
No.
Yeah,
It's not an effort question.
Yeah, but just, like, at the same time, there has to be, like, you can tell. I won't even name the programs. I don't want to, like, bring them into this specific thing, but you can tell with some U of H programs, they absolutely just love the staff, play their tails off, give every ounce of anything that they could give for that head coach and that staff. And it's hard to, read all the stuff about, the petty tyrant stuff, the not wanting to have snacks, and just the constant undermining of assistant coaches, and think, like, this team was absolutely getting the best it could get out of its players and out of its assistant coaches too. Like we pointed out on the show, there have been 6 different assistants in the 2 full-time positions since the 2020 season. That number, I will say, isn't like that. Who knows? That turnover could be normal. I haven't looked at 300 something Division I staffs to see if that's normal, but it's a churn. Like, it's a noticeable churn, and there's certainly on the roster an above Division I average noticeable churn too. So yeah, no, I think it all comes back to that. Like, how can you give your all for a staff that there's a lot of available evidence doesn't feel the same? It feels like you are something to be controlled rather than a player to mold, a player to get the best out of the collegiate level. And I'm not trying to make the people involved sound like boogeymen here.
No,
but at the same time, I think you're correct. Like, how, it's hard to win Division I anything. How can you expect in the not best of environments to produce a winning product? And I think it's related without going too far into, I think this affected this. And the people we talked to believed, I can tell you almost to a person, believed that the program that didn't get the best out of its collective parts because of the behavior of Vesley and the people.
Well, but that's the thing. So I know that rivalry series can be a bigger deal. And I also, again, want to stress, winning and losing is not the biggest thing here, right? There's other people that felt in danger, felt harassed. Like, that's a bigger problem. But they, in a weekend against the University of Texas Cows, they won 12-10 at opening night. They lost on the Saturday game. And then they played a 6-8 game that was fairly competitive down the stretch.
Yeah.
And I remember
the whole series was competitive. Yeah.
I most remember watching that rubber match game, and I watched very little softball, Sam, and I was like, okay, but, like, they're going to knock off Texas, and that's sick. And Texas, I should mention that recording this podcast, I believe is still playing.
One of the final very small number of teams in the Women's College World Series. Yep.
So that indicates to me that the talent, when things are clicking there, again, rivalries can be rivalries, but the talent there to at least be pretty good, and they're not. And so this adds a piece to the puzzle, if anything else. It just clearly distracting. And the nutritionist thing, you mentioned snacks in the clubhouse. Fighting comes after that to me in the reporting, because sometimes there are teams that just have a lot of aggression in the locker room over. Did you get the impression it boiled over to being more than just a particularly aggressive environment? Because I think Bobby was the one on your show that pointed out, well, like, sometimes sports is like that kind of, it borders on the line of, like, in other workplaces this would be harassment. Did you get the impression it passed that line in this instance?
I think if there wasn't the underlying context of a player bringing a loaded gun on a road trip and talking about shooting things, like, I think if it's just like, okay, some teammates here are a little more aggressive, a little more aggro than others. Yeah, and I fully agree with you. Like, sports, as much as any collective thing that we do, I think, blur that line. I think that within the larger context of a program where you're speaking out of anything that you're not satisfied about with the head coach won't just be ignored, but it'll be ignored and you will be punished for it. There wasn't a player doing all sorts of unchecked stuff, like like what was reported to us by a number of different people. I think if you don't have that context, then yeah, I'm not even sure necessarily it clears the bar of notable things to talk about here, like as it pertains to this program. But I think you take that with everything else, I think it's notable. Is it the most notable thing that we're talking about? Would it be basis on its own to do the episode that we did? No, I wouldn't think so. I think you need a lot more. You need a lot bigger picture of stuff going wrong. But yeah, I think on its own, maybe not as much, but in the larger context of everything going on, I think just another thing as part of a not so great pattern of this is how leadership operates, and this is how people feel about being in this program on like a daily basis, and not feeling great about that.
Well, and the juxtaposition, if folks listen to Lock on Cougs every day, we talk a lot about football and basketball because people want to talk about those things year round, or men's basketball, I should say specifically, because they want to talk about those things year round. Men's basketball has as good a culture as any Division I anything in the country. I don't think I need to argue that either. I think we're an understanding there. Football, there's an appreciation for the direction the culture is shifting, right? Whatever you think about the old or in with the new, things feel like they're going the right direction. The culture is a key part of that as well. Right, the playing through the echo, the whistle written on everybody's shirts and whatever. The culture here, entirely, is there a redeeming quality that at all? I feel like it's so much the opposite of what we were just talking about in those other two sports, and I don't know what to compare it to.
And we'll say, like, we did not talk to 100% of the players from last year's team and this year's team and things like that, because that's just, you will never get that level. Even people who are actual professionals, and I'm not including myself in an actual professional category here, that's not the level of report. Like, if that's the standard for, I'll believe it if it's this, you will never have something that meets that standard. So acknowledging that, like, there absolutely could be players that we weren't able to reach, staff members that weren't able to reach, that might feel 100% different. I will just say here, the episode's only like 2 hours, give or take, old, right at the point that you and I are sitting and talking to each other.
Yeah.
We've already got significant feedback from people in the program previously that was positive. I mean, because she was willing to publicly comment. Kennedy Thomas, who played for the program this past season, like publicly commented on this on her public Twitter account, like, about this. So I'm not basing it all on that. It's just one person who's willing to go public, but we've already in 2 hours gotten a lot of positive feedback on this thing. I don't think everyone in the U of H world will be happy with this. Again, not trying to make myself a martyr or anything like that, but just kind of what I said back at the top, like, had to be talked about, and we did not cover anything meaningfully redeeming about the program culture, which isn't to say everyone involved is bad, evil, boogeyman, worst person in the world. Well, no, that's not the case here. I think if anything, U of H softball in some weird indirect way, Parker, is kind of a story of complacency, because this was a very good program. It's been a few years now, but this is a program that took the Burnt Orange Cows, as you I think called them earlier, to the final of their regional 5 years ago. I was there in person with my co-host and watched the championship game against the Longhorns. This program's achieved at a high level. It's achieved at a high level under this head coach. I think the on-field results are certainly the least important thing we're going to talk about here tonight, but I think it's part of that not so pretty picture that you can paint about the program's culture. Is it less important than people feeling unsafe or people feeling trapped or anything like that? No, certainly not. But I think it all God, it's like, I'm trying to remember the Oscar Wilde thing. I might be the first person to reference the picture of Dorian Gray on your podcast, but it's like,
yes,
it's like as the interior culture gets worse, the outside, the public presenting face of the program, which is it's on-field play. I mean, that's any teams, that's the one, like, you usually don't get to go to practices. So you see the team, it's when they're competing in some kind of official contest, and the contests have not gone Cougar softball's way. And if you want to make it a full circle here, I think, connects back to a culture of, people are comfortable in their jobs, people are comfortable in, I can run this program how I can run it without any accountability, because no accountability mechanism at U of H actually held anyone leadership accountable here. And I think believing in some ways you're untouchable too. Like I think that's kind of what it all comes back to. If I answered your original question in my
No, it
response
did,
there.
and I would also say that feeling of untouchable, you could almost argue goes to a bunch of different directions. That these are typically half-hour shows, Sam. That could be a whole that could go a bunch of different angles.
Yeah.
Dang. Before I let you tell people where to go find the full thing and all of that, and this may be a really long question that I don't have enough time to answer, but what's the next step? Is the next step an internal investigation, more thorough one? What do you think? What do you think should or would happen next?
Yeah, I think the best thing I could do is first, I will answer your question. This is not going to be copping out to, I don't know what to, I'm not qualified, but I will preface my answer by saying that, I am not a college athletics administrator. I am somebody who I've been a middle manager. I would say I'm a senior middle manager in my day job now.
It's a stumper because it's like theoretically the people that should be told have been told.
Yeah, and you might have recalled this from because you told me to listen to the episode.
I did. It was well done. I thought first.
This one, by the way, this was not me trying to fish for a did you no. U of H gave it we reached out to U of H for comment. I believe we sent it out on Sunday afternoon or something like that, and we told them we're doing this episode tonight on Tuesday, June 4th. We're gonna be talking about these things. We broke down the allegations that we had substantiated to that point, and just said does U of H have public comment? And U of H, to their credit, because I candidly thought I was just going to get U of H doesn't comment on these personnel matters, et cetera, et cetera. U of H confirmed that the matter was passed on to police. They didn't specify whether it was University of Houston or local or anything like that, but they confirmed that they could not substantiate allegations here. So that implies the existence of some kind of Schrodinger's investigation here into this. But we also had reported pretty conclusively to us that a number of players met with the athletic director and softball direct report, Chris Pesman and Dewana Shizer, respectively. And after meeting, just heard nothing. Does that mean nothing happened? I don't know. But the people who met to try and rectify this felt like they gotten ghosted. Basically, felt like the meeting had been ignored. So, with the caveat again that I am not somebody qualified to make the call for a major public university and how to investigate this, I would say at the very least, and I think this is the most minimum of steps. I think this is less steps than U of H should take here. I think softball needs a new sports admin. That's a really strong start here. And I would say some kind of independent investigation ultimately into this. I don't think that's an unfair ask. I'm not saying an independent investigation that comes to this conclusion. I'm just saying some kind of public investigation that's not just vaguely referenced in a press release to people seeking comment.
Well, and like you said, they said they looked into it, and it sounds like the players thought that but not much happened or nothing happened or whatever. Yep. And frankly, I think then the question is begs okay, well, if in your professional opinion to whomever you're asking, if nothing happened, why did nothing happen? What side of the story are we missing then? Right. Yeah. Frankly, I would be happy to hear about some gigantic piece of the story that I'm missing. That'd make me feel a lot more comfortable, honestly. Yeah. I don't know what it would be. But
some transparency. I think that's an incredibly vague way of answering your question, but just transparency from the University of Houston. And I love my alma mater. There's nothing more than that I want in this life than to see the University of Houston do well on the field of play and also continue to have this incredibly rapid rise in prestige as a university, like what Reno Couture has done here in 16-ish years. It's incredible. It's miraculous. Almost. I love this school. This is not it doesn't make me feel good to report this stuff about my alma mater, about the one college I'll ever, consider rooting for in this life. But also at the same time, it's not the kind of stuff you can sit on.
Well, and y'all covered that fairly thoroughly, and I think I believe it was Bobby that mentioned like we would absolutely be discussing other universities and how they need to address this if it
Yeah,
happened to them. Right? Like we just would, and it wouldn't be right to like sit on it and not talk about it if it were just because it's Houston.
yeah,
Um, and I thought that was well put. You can hear the whole conversation, all on all things softball, and I think all the right tones. The three of you, frankly, the three of you do a good show every week. So I don't mean to say you should only listen to this one, but you guys cover the details of every sport on campus all year long, even when they're as ugly as these details. And so, Sam, for people that haven't heard of it before, where can they find the show and the reporting?
yeah. Like you can see on screen right below me. But if you were listening, Scott and Holman, like the two streets in Third Ward, the namesake of our show. Fun aside, Parker, and a very not fun episode topic. But every so often in our early years, we would reach out to people who have on our show, and they would ask, they would reply, "Hey, Scott." And that's how I knew my email wasn't getting read. Or we got, which one you use Scott, which one you use Holman. And I think we settled on me being Scott and Dustin being Holman. But no, Scott and Holman, like the Third Ward intersection podcast, PAWD cast at SH Podcast on Twitter, whatever it's calling itself this week. But the Scott Holman Podcast, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music recently, and anywhere else I'm forgetting that you put podcasts in your ears. Again, Parker, like I said at the top, like it's been really exciting to watch how quickly like you've grown this thing Locked On Cougs. And while I wish we were talking on like happier circumstances, I'm glad to finally talk to you about this, and appreciate you giving me the time of day to talk about it and to give, I think, what's an important story, a much more important story than me, a little bit more light. So I appreciate it, man.
I'm happy to have you on. We'll talk more off pod about getting together on more happy stuff later, because I agree. Rising tide lifts all boats as far as the Houston Cougars are concerned.
Absolutely.
But thank you for stopping by and talking about something more serious. I know it's not the most fun way to end the night, but thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.